AI is very effective. It's very effective, but I don't think it's very efficient.
So you have a military background, right?
It's life-changing. You'll never be the same person, after an experience like that, being, 20, 21 years old and, just getting my mind prepared for war and just not knowing what to expect. It's an unbelievable event. I say I was a born entrepreneur for the wrong reasons. I was innovative. I was able to convince people of things and sell a story.
Have you always been like a pretty disciplined guy, or did that come about from your time spent overseas?
My 9th grade year in school, I didn't care. Like, I was around girls and puberty was around and happening to me, and it's like that's where my focus was.
In your experience, from your perspective, what you've seen, because you're a little bit deeper into AI than most people in the world, what are you seeing? Where is this heading? And most importantly, how can entrepreneurs leverage AI in the right way?
The thing is that we're pushing commercialization so hard that we are democratizing it before we've had a chance to really understand, to learn how to drive the car and handle that much horsepower.
Paul, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And you were just telling me you're calling from San Diego, one of the coolest cities, I think, in the United States, because it's like Los Angeles, but without all the traffic, and you still get the ocean, and I feel like it's way more chill. But that's my perspective on San Diego. What's your take on it?
My perspective on San Diego is pretty much spot on. I think in terms of technology and startups and business opportunities, I think it's one of America's best kept secrets, and I think it's underrated. San Diego is largely seen as kind of like like a fun town, a university town, a border town, and really just overall a beautiful city. But we don't really look at San Diego for the muscle that it has. So it's really a sleeper. And as far as California is concerned, it's definitely giving Los Angeles and San Francisco a run for their money.
I agree. I think San Diego is super cool. How is the tech scene out there?
Tech scene is booming. San Diego has a huge market in the biotech space, biosciences, life sciences, healthcare. And then, of course, military is big. So DoD dual use is huge. And then cross-border tech collaboration is also a big one. I was just in Tijuana recently for some tech events. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, being, that it's a border town, to kind of international arbitrage, so to speak, but also, cross-border talent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I have some friends who have some operations on Tijuana, and they just go back and forth between California and Tijuana. So very interesting how they juggle all that. So you have a military background, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Tell me about that. I'm curious about that background.
I joined the Marine Corps in December of 1999. And then I went to my initial training in September of 2000. I was trained in San Diego, their Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Camp Pendleton. And I was based out there for my first 4 years, minus my job training, which was in El Paso, another border town. And from there, I spent a few years just kind of doing other things in other places in the Marine Corps, such as Kuwait and Iraq and Qatar, and got deployed 4 times, starting with the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And then I ended up leaving Pendleton and spent about a year in Minneapolis MEPS, which stands for Military Entrance Processing Station. And then from there, I spent my last part of my 10 years in Cherry Point and Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. So 2000 to 2010.
Wow. Okay, so you were in it. I mean, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but how was that, just being out there? And I'm curious, that must have been pretty insane.
It's life-changing. you'll never be the same person, after an experience like that, being, 20, 21 years old, and, just getting my mind prepared for war and just not knowing what to expect. It's an unbelievable event to have to, take on. And it's an unbelievable evolution to get involved in. It's like you can never train for. You're never. We do a lot of training in the Marines, but you're never as trained as you could always train more, right? It's like, but at the end of the day, you got to go do your job at some point, and training has to become execution at some point. And so, then you're thrown into a situation, and no amount of training can totally prepare you, in my opinion. But, you're thrown into a situation where, it's very austere and ambiguous. And, that's, I think, what brings the best out of you, that brings the best out of you as a Marine, as a person, as a leader. And you're thrown in these situations, you have to figure out what to do, And so those things are things that I've learned innately, but also very deliberately. And I'm able to take those things, consciously and subconsciously, and apply that to my time as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so much what you just said that could be applied towards being an entrepreneur, being an investor, just being in that world. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're just under constant pressure, depending on what life cycle the business is in. Have you always been like a pretty disciplined guy, or did that come about from your time spent overseas?
In some ways, when I was in high school, I actually always say, like, I'm a born entrepreneur, but I'm a born entrepreneur for the wrong reasons, man. Like, most people were out like creating businesses when they're like freaking 10 years old, man. When I was 10 years old, I was getting into stuff, right? Like, so my ninth grade year in school, I didn't care. Like, I was around girls, and puberty was around and happening to me. And, and it's like, that's where my focus was. And so I was making like F's and D's, and my dad was a Marine and a Vietnam vet as well. And just wasn't going to have that. And, and I knew that. And, having a father that is from the South, they believe in corporal punishment. So I'm like, oh my God, my dad is going to, he's going to physically demolish me. And he's like 6'4", right? So 6'4", 300 pounds. So I'm like, I was totally afraid of my dad. And so I'm like, I don't think these F's and D's are going to go over too well. I got to get myself out of this. So I like forged my report cards with his signature, and I fooled my parents and my teachers for like the whole year. And when the school year was over, the chickens came home to roost finally. And he found out that he thought I was making B's, but I was turning my D's and my F's into B's and forging my report card. So, I say I was a born entrepreneur for the wrong reasons. I was innovative. I was able to convince people of things and sell a story, right? And that was one of the things that I got into. But so that's kind of like a little bit about me. And I'm definitely not forging things today, but I take the good, and I've turned all those bad qualities into good qualities, and the Marine Corps has definitely helped me do that.
Yeah. So you got back when? What year did you get back?
So I was in Iraq. My first tour was from January to June of 2003. That was the invasion.
Okay.
And then I was over there again from January to September 04. And then I was over there again for 13 months from January to January. So January 07 to January 08. And then again from January 09 to September, like late September 09. Yeah. So about 3 years in country in total. Wow. Our deployment cycles just happened to always fall in January because generally I was on the West Coast or attached to a unit that just happened to be on that deployment cycle. But other groups of Marines, they would fall into like a June to January type of deployment cycle, right? So typical deployments are like 6 months, but the longer we were over there, the Marines kind of became more like an occupying force, right, than a kick in the door force. And we're not really built for that. And so I ended up doing a 13-month tour, which was like, I don't know. I don't know what solitary confinement feels like, but it must be that.
Wow. Why do you say that? Why do you say solitary confinement? Like, what happened? Why was it?
Well, if I could imagine myself being in solitary confinement, like a prisoner being in solitary confinement, it must be like it must play tricks on your mind, you know. And so being over there for 13 months, you know, doing the same thing, the same mission, the same routine every day, and not having a break from that, you know, not having the opportunity for like civilian life, like a normal life, or being able to go where you want, or like, you know, if you want to go see a movie, or, you know, if you want to go out to eat or go to a hotel or something, or go to a concert, like there's none of that, you know. So it does get pretty monotonous, which again, you know, that experience is something that I carry over in entrepreneurship. You know, it's like, how much can you take? You know, well, I just imagine like being in that situation. How do I handle it? And so then, like, you know, as an entrepreneur, how do I get through, you know, maybe not so good days or not so good periods in the business? And, you know, so I'm able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, there's just so many parallels you can draw between
Absolutely.
Your life overseas and what you were doing for the country. And thank you for your service. And now as an entrepreneur, as a VC. So I want to hear about that now. Like, you get back, and then how do you get into that world? What happened then?
It was a lot of kind of self-intervention and self-reflection and exploration. You know, out of the Marine Corps, you know, I thought the thing that I needed to do was, you know, go get a job. My plan was to go into CIA and NSA. I had applied there. But, you know, that didn't work out for me at the time. I also received an OCS commission, which stands for Officer Candidate School. Okay. So if I had done that, I'd probably be a lieutenant colonel at least by now. But I didn't take that route either. So here I am in the civilian world, and, you know, I'm working, right? I had a 9-to-5 job, started out selling learning management systems, and kind of bounced around, right? And just trying to find my way and figure out my way, and what was a good fit for me, but also not understanding really the corporate culture, not really understanding that at all. And how do I fit into that was very difficult, you know? So I did climb my way up. Eventually by 2016, I was, you know, I mean, I went from my first job of making like 25,000 a year out of the Marine Corps, like 30,000 a year, and then commission or whatever on top, right? So I went from basically like making 30,000 a year. By the time 2016 came, I worked my way up to like 120,000 a year, you know.
Just by sticking around, hanging in there, and just getting promoted and working your way up.
Yeah. But the thing is, I had a hard time in corporate because I didn't understand it, you know. And I just didn't understand why businesses do the things that they do, and why managers in business do the things that they do. And when it's not in the best interest of many times the employees, so including myself, you know. And so I went through a series of, you know, leaving jobs. I think I got fired once, but the majority of the times I was leaving jobs, you know.
Why were you leaving?
And why? Just because, you know, frustration, not trusting my bosses, bad management, you know. And so I just had enough. I got laid off in 2016 from that job, and I just had enough. So I said, well, what's next for Paul? And I had an opportunity to go work in Afghanistan for Garda. And I said, well, either I'm going to do that or, I'm going to start my own business, but there's no way I could go back to corporate. And so I ended up starting my own business because the opportunity with Garda required me to go to Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, but it was going to take like 3 months before that training slot opened. So I had to make some money in the meantime. And, I'm not like really a minimum wage guy, but I also realized I'm not a corporate guy either. So I'm like, what kind of guy am I? I think I'm an entrepreneur. And so I started my own company, and I've been making money on my own ever since, and eventually I was referred into a VC firm, and they needed some help raising their fund. So they brought me in as a venture partner. And that's where I kind of learned the ropes of VC. And I was like, I think this is the place for me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like it's the entrepreneur of entrepreneurs, right? It's like, yeah, I don't want to just build one business. Like I want to try to build many businesses. So, and I thought I could do that. And, I thought I could add value to the world like that. I really wanted to like see how I could use my business to serve the community and make, try to make my part of the world around me better. And I think money can do that, and what I've seen in venture capital, quite honestly, Aamir, is like, I've seen people use money as a weapon. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of money flow through in and out of my business and on different projects, millions of dollars. And I've seen people use it as a weapon, but I've seen very few people use it for like good, right? Without like, without selfish reasons or agendas. I haven't seen a lot of people doing good with money, right? Like without some kind of, hidden agenda behind it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's interesting that you said you see it used as a weapon, right? Or not for good. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? I'm curious. Like, how did that happen?
So I've seen people make promises to other people, and then, they take money and, they use it for their own, agenda or whatever their own purposes are. And other people are kind of left, empty-handed at that point. So selfishness is one thing, but in terms of using it as a weapon, I've seen people use it to attack other people. That's what I mean. So I've seen, lawyers get involved in situations all the way to litigations and lawsuits, et cetera. So I've seen things like that happen. We've seen stories like this in the news. And so I see that people use money as a weapon to, attack other people legally, of course, with lawyership, so to speak. So that's what I mean. That's what I mean by a weapon. Of course, there's much worse things that you can do, in terms of using money as a weapon, right?
Yeah, but in the business world, I mean, that's an instrument that's used to really control people or scare them, intimidate them.
Exactly.
I mean, as an entrepreneur, yeah, right. As an entrepreneur, what do you watch out for when that happens? How do you protect yourself when you're just someone who's starting off and, those types of forces, millions of dollars are being thrown around, and how do you navigate that? How do you protect yourself?
Well, I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks, but a lot of people will do a deal, or they'll get involved in a project or an investment or whatever. Everybody gets involved with seemingly good intent at first, and then when the deal falls apart, everyone wants to lawyer up. Mm-hmm. But what I do is I've kind of become essentially my own lawyer. I do a lot of my own contracts, my term sheets, et cetera.
Really?
And I know what clauses to put in and what clauses not to put in, et cetera. So what I do is very preemptive. I make sure that there's certain clauses in there that can't be backtracked or it's very concrete, so to speak. So that's what I do to protect myself. I make sure that the clauses that I have in the contract are that the contract is more how do I say, leveraged to my corner, so to speak. It's not to disadvantage anyone or anything like that, because we're going to do the deal, and we're going to do the deal how we agreed to do it. But the minute someone steps out of line, no, we can go back to the contract, and the ball, the advantage is then in my court. So I just make sure that the advantage is in my court. And I also don't pine. I don't pine on deals. I'm like, I get founders that come up to me sometimes and they're like, this is a really good deal. We're closing around. The deadline is in 10 days, and then we're probably going to close the round. I'm like, okay, pressure tactics. So come to me in 11 days and let me know where you're at. So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm like, I'm not going to be pressured. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to make moves on hype or FOMO. I'm going to make moves because I truly believe in the opportunity, and I'm always going into things with a clear head. And I think that's probably some of the mistakes that I made in the past, is that I did get caught up on hype. I did get caught up on FOMO. So you'll have to bleep that out. So I did get caught up on FOMO because I was so excited about the opportunity, and so it ended up that I was the one that got burned in the long run, and me and other people that were involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess part of that's experience, right? You got to get burned a couple of times. And go through it and figure out like, oh, okay,
absolutely.
Now I'm not going to give into these pressure tactics. I'm going to let the FOMO go, and then just like you said, I think you put it really well, which is invest in it because you believe in it.
Yeah.
Have you read that book, that Chris Voss book? What's it called? The negotiation book. Some of the things you're saying remind me of that.
I must check it out. I've made it an objective to read a book a week this year. So
okay.
I'm at 6.
Nice. Wow. Okay. It's a good start.
I'm on my 6th book. Yeah. So I've read Elon Musk. I read Securities Law 101, which I would advise more people before they raise money or decide to invest to read securities laws. Let's see, what else have I read? The Venture Mindset. I've read a book on neurodivergence, and then I read a book on Elon Musk, and how he does deals and how he thinks. So all great books. But what I'm trying to do with my reading strategy is I'm trying to read like more diversity of topics, not just within my trade, so that I can see how things are done in other industries. Yeah. And then break the mold in my own industry. So I'm reading a book on political science now. I think it's timely given what's going on in the world.
Yeah. What's the political science book called?
It's by Francis Fukuyama, Political Order and Political Decay.
Nice.
So that's a book that I'm actually starting this week.
I really admire that you've made that like a goal to do a book a week. I mean, I feel like with Audible, assuming you're listening to a lot of books, like that's one of the best ways to knock some books out is just there's so much time you're in the house, like doing chores or walking around or on drives. Ideal time for learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you would be surprised at like how many people just like how much time we kill. Like if you're standing in line, and the beautiful thing is like you can do it all on the phone, right? So like you don't have to carry a big book around, like so like you're standing in line at the grocery store or whatever, and like just open up your app and just get a couple pages in. So I just realized like, and it wasn't a New Year's resolution. It was just like, man, I really kill a lot of time. Like, yes, I work hard. I work a lot, but there's a lot of time. There's a huge void of time that is not used. And I'm like, geez, I'm 44 and I've got more life behind me than I do in front of me. So I'm like, I need to do something, man. I've only got so many years left.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm 36, and I think it hit me when I was 35. I was like, oh crap, I gotta start waking up early. Like I can't just wake up at 9:30 anymore. Like I need to be up like at 5 a.m. and get stuff going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
So I joined the 5 a.m. club last year, and that was a big game changer for me. I just feel like the day stretches out so much more, and I'm able to get a lot more done. But I totally get what you mean. Like there's just so much dead time throughout the day still. And I don't know. It's for me, it's like less about maximizing, and it's more about putting your mind down a path where you're creating new pathways, new knowledge is coming in, so that you're not getting stuck in the past, right? Because like if you just sit there and you're not really learning or consuming anything new, your mind gravitates towards like, oh, hey, that deal didn't work out, or that person said something to me, or this happened, and you're just kind of like going back. Whereas like when you're learning something, you're putting new consumption in your mind, new knowledge, and your mind's thinking ahead. How can I utilize this? Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about that before. And I feel like you're just operating on a totally different frequency then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are in your mind, like, what is like one thing that I could give your listeners that maybe, hasn't been said on your show before, or that, whether it's about venture capital or AI or the military, what could I give from my background and my experience that would be different for your listeners?
Yeah, good question. There's two things in particular. I'll ask the second one in a bit, but the first one, like you have an AI background. So I know that's one of the biggest questions that people have. And it's inevitable, right? We got to figure out how to best leverage AI. And all these entrepreneurs are thinking the same thing. Like everyone's downloaded a bunch of tools and whatnot. But I feel like now we're coming into a place where people are looking at all the tools and saying to themselves, man, how much of this am I really using, right? And they're starting to cut down some of these tools. And in your experience, from your perspective, what you've seen, because you're a little bit deeper into AI than most people in the world, what are you seeing? Where is this heading? And most importantly, how can entrepreneurs leverage AI in the right way?
Yeah, it's funny. So I have a newsletter that I publish pretty much on a weekly basis. But it's called Venture Capital and AI. And today, I just wrote an article, a newsletter edition about, I don't know have you heard of OpenClaw?
Yeah. The website, like the Reddit style website they created with a bunch of AI agents just talking to each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Insane.
And it's pretty cool. I mean, I guess, especially for technological engineers, so to speak, but you can also use it as an everyday consumer. But the thing is like, it's almost like if you want to get somewhere really fast, right? Like say, like you got a Ferrari and like freaking 800 horsepower, but the alignment's all jacked up, right? And it's, you know what I mean? So it's like OpenClaw is like that 800 horsepower, right? Agentic AI, but the guardrails are real loose, and it's a security issue, So my newsletter is like, I'm not going to use that thing. And here's why. Because like you plug in, all of your lifestyle critical information, like the stuff that could like sabotage your bank account or, your health, like if you use health apps or, anything like that, right? It gives a warm, reception for like hackers, et cetera. Like it's a nesting area, man.
Yeah.
And so, I would just say that I do think AI is good, right? But I don't think it's good everywhere. I really don't. I think that AI is good for like specific use cases, for very specific use cases. Like we talk about guardrails, but guardrails wouldn't be such a big deal if we used AI for very, very niche use cases. But we're using it for everything. And the thing is like organizations are commercializing this stuff, which when you commercialize something, you also democratize it. I call it demercialization, right? And so, and you can't really have one without the other. You can't democratize something without commercializing it as well. So the thing is that we're pushing commercialization so hard that we are democratizing it before we've had a chance to really understand, to learn how to drive the car and handle that much horsepower, so to speak. So I think we need to slow down and understand that AI is it fits certain segments of life, but it doesn't need to be used in everything that we're doing, whether it's like dating. I mean, I think there's like dating apps for like AI. I'm like, I don't need AI for me to be able to find out who I'm compatible with, man. Like, I don't need that. Like, so specific use cases, and then just understanding that a paradigm shift, because right now regulation is being kind of pushed at the governmental organizational level, and that's great, but that doesn't mean anything for the millions of consumers that are using it. So it needs to be policed at the consumer level, in my opinion. And I'll go back to vehicles again. You can think of like the interstate system in the US is kind of like an automation, right? The stoplights go on a time system. Everything is on a time system. The cars go back and forth, et cetera. And so you can kind of think of it like that. And so with that analogy, if you think of kind of AI is almost like that interstate system, so to speak. Like we regulated cars, right? Like there is car regulation, but you can only regulate cars so much, right? Like, so like, I mean, you get a Dodge Charger, it can do 200 miles an hour if you get the Hellcat. But why doesn't it do 200 miles an hour on I-95? Because we police the drivers. That's the thing, so, we could regulate cars to death, but then it would limit like the overall capability of the domestic or the commercial vehicle. And so we need that capability. Otherwise the cars kind of lose their efficiency. Right. And so I would say, focusing more on user regulation and understanding that it is a cultural technology. And then last but not least, AI is very effective. It's very effective, but I don't think it's very efficient. Right. And so when we talk about, ChatGPT is a great example. It's very effective. It can spit out an answer. I don't have to search on Google forever. But I think there are a lot of issues with ChatGPT where it's not efficient, right? Like, I think a prompt like produces more pollution. Like one prompt produces more pollution than like driving your car a few miles or something. They had some kind of statistic.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So like one prompt produces a hell of a lot of like waste or pollution. So that's like not efficient, right? And like, how long can we go like that, et cetera? So I think efficiency now needs to be the priority. Effectiveness is there, but that would be and I've given this analogy to people before, but it's like the Model T Ford now we have EVs.
Yeah.
Much more efficient than the horse and buggy. But if you look at the Model T Ford, and then before we had carburetors, not very effective, but not very efficient on the environment, right? And so now we still have effectiveness, but now we have more efficiency with EVs and just better gas mileage, et cetera. So we're trying to get there. So that would be kind of my thinking on AI. And I know that is not very granular. Like, you can't just blanket those statements and apply it to everything in AI, right? But it's at a broad level, and I think those are the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I know you had said before you're a big Elon fan, or you had read some of his books. And I think I was talking to my brother about this, what he's doing right now with SpaceX and being able to build, I guess, data centers in space. And he's trying to think that, harnessing that is a much more better use of energy rather than building those data centers over here on Earth, where it's creating a lot more waste. And then there's infinite amounts of energy out in space, and you're leveraging the sun. And it just, I don't know all the particulars of it. I'm reading it and I'm like, this does make sense. And so to your point of entering an age of efficiency rather than effectiveness, I think now everyone realizes the effectiveness of AI. And now I think what you had said, right, trying to reduce waste and make it better for us in efficiency. I had never realized that a couple of prompts create more pollution. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I don't know word for word the exact statistic.
It's the principle behind it, though, right? Where the idea is that we're expending a lot of energy whenever we're using AI.
But we don't think about these things in a first world country like America. That's we haven't been a production society for a long time, right? Like by and large. We've outsourced for many years. And, I think with the current regime, presidential regime, they're trying to kind of bring us back to somewhat of a production society, but we haven't been a production society, for, the latter half of the 20th century. And we've been a consumption society, right? And so, I think, that changes mindsets over time. And we consume like it's easy, but we don't know how it feels to produce. And so because we're outsourcing it, right? And then you look at places where, this is outsourced, and the toll that it takes on the land, the mining and the, the forced labor sometimes, and hard labor that goes into, the mining and the resource cultivation that we need, to produce the power behind this, right? And the resources that power the data centers, et cetera. So I think it's good that, our presidential cabinet, for what it's worth, is trying to bring production back to America, because it's kind of like the story of the little red hen. If you don't, if you're just eating at the table, but you're not, participating in the creation, then like it's kind of hard to really appreciate it. And I think we've lost appreciation for what we have. And like, I mean, does anyone like really think about that on a daily basis? Like, I think about it because like I'm always doing research and contracts, and I'm like, geez, man, I think about it daily, and I'm like, I get a little bit frustrated with ChatGPT because I'm like, I have to enter prompts multiple times to get it on track. I'm like, no, like a good example is when the U.S. captured President Nicolas Maduro down in Venezuela. And I'm like, I entered something in the ChatGPT, and I'm like, did you hear about that? And it was like, no, that's fake news. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I was like, no, like check your sources. Like this literally happened within the last 24 hours. Check your sources. Like, no, that's fake news. And like, I mean, I had to put like 10 prompts in before I finally got it to see, it's actually really happened. Right. And so like that part can be frustrating, but I think there's an appreciation for me personally that goes behind like ChatGPT and some of these products. I'm like, man, I don't have to like scour the internet, right, endlessly. Like if I have a question or idea, I can pressure test it. I can get to the source right away on ChatGPT instantly. So you need to think about how much that changed our lives within the last few years. And I don't know if people really do, So.
Yeah, no, that's true. When you were just saying that last point about ChatGPT, I was thinking that's one of the advantages, I think, of Grok.
Yeah.
Is that Grok is taking all the real-time info from Twitter, which I don't know if Elon bought Twitter initially for that purpose, but I think it was a coup now because you have all this real-time data, people talking about it, news getting posted, and then Grok is kind of just pulling from that source. And being able to, whenever I need to figure out something real time, I'll use Grok.
Yeah.
General stuff, ChatGPT, and Gemini. I haven't quite gotten used to Gemini yet, to be honest. So
yeah, I just stick to one, man. Like people have told me like, if you want to go off of accuracy, right? Like if you want to test the accuracy of the systems, use Claude, use Grok, use Chat. But I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Like what I do have time for is common sense. So I'm like, okay, I've got a basic idea or a basic understanding of something in my mind, and I'm not plagiarizing my mind. Like I'm not plagiarizing the information into my mind of like when I don't have a basic understanding. So like when I go to ChatGPT, I already have a basic understanding of something. So I don't need to go to Grok. I don't need to go to Claude or any of these other ones. Even if ChatGPT gives me the wrong answer, I know something's up. I've got enough experience in what I'm asking to know that something's up, So that's the thing, is like it's an aid. It's not God. Right. And I think people kind of look at it as like this parental or this kind of like this patriarchal or matriarchal like type of figure, or like omnipotent like type of force or thing, but it's man-made, and so when I use it, like I'm kind of using it with is an aid, and it's never really going to be more than that. It's not a replacement for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's generally how I feel about it too, is that it's at the end of the day, it's a tool, right? And you can't outsource your mind. You can use it as like a study buddy, just to grab perspective, or like a friend that you just need to bounce a quick idea off of, and then you can move on to the next thing, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think with ChatGPT, I think it's changing up the game on a lot of things. Being a venture capitalist, I have a very unorthodox approach to venture capital, and like how I think it is now, but like where I think it's headed, right? And like so, I get PitchBook alerts, for example, right? And PitchBook has pretty good alerts, like that they send to my email. I'm like, oh, really? And then I'll do some research on that on the internet. I'm like, yeah, this is making sense. But one thing that I seen. And so at Digerati Investments, we have a debt first, equity second model. And I came up with that a while ago, but there's a reason that we have that, right? And one of the reasons that we have it is because I see the cap table disasters that happen to startups. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to maybe do this, right? But I got an alert from PitchBook that said venture debt is increasing like a lot. Like more founders are going after venture debt, and AI is a big reason for it. But there's other reasons, but AI is a big reason because these companies are so expensive to build, and it's very, very hard on the startups. It's very, how do I say? It's very dilutive on the startups to inject the amount of equity capital that they need early on to build these companies, right? And so a lot of them are actually going after venture debt. And I'm like, yeah, the writing is on the wall. Equity, I think, is getting more strict than it used to be. And so our model at Digerati Investments kind of leads around financial innovation, but also, let's go into deals with some prudence, and, let's go into deals, with maturity and not excitement, and equity investment tends to be about excitement, but debt investment tends to be about reality. So I want to be in reality, because reality does hit us at some point. And I think it's unfortunate for founders because they don't seem to understand, or they don't seem to care that. So we talk about founder friendly capital, and it seems friendly, great terms, whatever. And then like 5 or 6, 7 years later, then, it doesn't work out. Right. And the statistics reflect this, that 80% or whatever of venture investments fail, and they fail to return, and so that's when reality hits. And so I see is like, it's what's really founder friendly, and I think the market has done a great job at advertising early stage investment, whereas debt being the enemy, and debt's not the enemy. It's actually your friend, but you do want to be careful with debt too, because you don't want to you don't want to just raise debt for the sake of raising debt. You want to be strategic about it. And that's what I see a lot with startups is they're raising capital for the sake of raising capital. They think they need it, but there's no strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot more now with AI, you can get by without the funding for a little bit and at least create a proof of concept or a product, get some distribution, get some traction, and then go out and raise, as opposed to just, just going for it from the beginning and hoping that, an advisor at the firm will change your fortunes,
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting too. Just off subject, I'm not going into politics or anything, but with the immigration thing going on across the world, like I do wonder how that affects like things like EB-5 visas and like buying your citizenship by way of investment. I'm wondering, like, is there some incentive there for foreign investors to put money into a U.S. company in support of gaining their citizenship? That might be an angle that founders should look at. Is if you're raising money for your startup, maybe that's a way to do it. Because I think the immigration laws are really tight right now, and it's hard even for people with that are well off, so to speak, to get into the country. But I don't think a lot of foreign investors maybe even know about EB-5 visas, or about like you can buy your way into a country. But that may be a causal benefit on both sides, for the founders, but also for foreign investors.
Yeah, good point. Paul, before we wrap up today, I want to give you a chance to give the listeners any final takeaways that you have, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. I would just say that, in terms of some of the things that we talked about today, when you look, like, business is really hard, right? That's why they say business is war. Like, business is really hard. So, whatever you're setting out to do, just be adaptable. Like, don't be necessarily caught up on whatever it is that you're building per se, but like have a grander vision, so to speak, and be willing to pivot with inside that vision. There's nothing wrong with pivoting, but stopping the plate altogether is not good, right? Yeah, I had a founder recently that I was working with, and they were building a startup, and they just couldn't do it anymore, and I'm like, that is like, if anything, pivot, if anything, slow down, but do not stop. And that is like one thing that I learned in the Marine Corps. We used to have these out in the West, in the mountains, in California. We used to do these things called death marches about once every couple of months, or at least sometimes once a month. It was like 20 miles, 25 miles sometimes. You got like 80, 90, 100 pounds of gear, and you're going up, 60, 70% grades through the mountains. And you're going about at a brisk walk, 3 to 4.5 miles an hour. And it's brutal. I have blisters on my feet, et cetera. But, you never want to be that person that falls out. And I never fell out, but I always fell back, because they would always put me, I'm about 5'7", and they would always put me behind the 6'4" dude. and they'd be like, Claxton, speed up. And then they'd be like, slow down. Like, because the thing is like, you want to keep a dispersion. If you're in combat, you want to keep dispersion, right? So if you get mortared, or if you get bombed or whatever, like, you don't all get blown up, you have dispersion. And so they'd be like, slow down. But you just told me to speed up. You don't understand, like, this dude's steps are like 3 of mine. So, but either way, some guys would fall out of those death marches, due to heat exhaustion or just cramping or just their body just couldn't take it anymore. Now, I fell back to the unit. I fell back a few people, but I never fell out. And so one foot in front of the other and never, ever stop, no matter what happens. And that's what I could leave you with is, it's like, this is really tough. I made a lot of money in 1 year and I lost like $500,000 just, and I mean, a lot of people that would like discourage them forever and, they would just be done, but you can't be like that, because the thing is, if you got that far, look at how far you've come, so use those as lessons to do better the next time. And you're going to do 10 times better the next time. So there's that. And then just keep in mind that AI is a cultural technology and it's not meant to be used for everything. Use it for the most important things in life, and when it comes to the most important things in life, protect yourself, because AI is one of those technologies that retains information, right? And so in such a way that it learns you. And if somebody kind of hacks that system, like, for example, ChatGPT, I've got dialogue, right? If ChatGPT gets hacked, how much intimate information did you put inside of ChatGPT? So just be careful with that, because it is a central point for hacking, things like not necessarily ChatGPT, but any AI, right? So there's that. And then when it comes to like capital strategy and just, if you're raising a round, think outside the box. Don't be one of these founders that, incorporates your company and then, you give equity to a few name drop advisors, and then like you put together a pitch deck and you're like, okay, time to go raise money. Be a little bit more strategic and have a little bit more pride, in my opinion. Like, have a little bit of pride, man, like to build up leverage in your company. Don't beg investors for capital. Like, wait until you have a little bit more leverage, and don't just pitch investors like you're begging. Like, it's like the first thing that I get pitched all the time. And the first thing, I never speak to these people. I don't know these people. And they're like, hey, we're raising $1 million. You want to invest? Like, I don't know you. So it's a courting process. And, if you're any good at dating, then just understand it's a courting process, and you don't go straight for third base or whatever. So that would be my takeaways, and my leave it's for the audience. If they want to connect with me, I'm pretty easy to find. Paul Anthony Claxton on LinkedIn, and then my personal website is paulclaxton.io.
All right, cool. Be adaptable. It's okay to pivot. One foot in front of the other. Don't stop. AI is a cultural technology. And think outside the box and enjoy the courting process.
That's right. Don't be like all these other founders that got a pitch deck. I'm going to do a YC safe. Yeah. Okay. There's other investment instruments and there's other investment strategies out there, and there's other ways to put money into your company, and not just YC safe equity.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you. Okay.
All right, man. I appreciate you having me as well.
Take care.